It was the fall I started community college. I had my fair share of creepers, being 18 and fairly fit, but this one was the worst I've ever had. It's the only really scary thing that has personally happened to me. I was on the bus from my English class, which had let out at 8:45. It was dark, windy, and cold, so when I saw a homeless man bored with not enough money to pay for his fare, I decided to pay for him. I'll never forget what he looked like. He had a cataract in one eye, greasy hair parted down the middle. One side was gray and the other side was black, a navy blue beanie, and a ratty hooded brown coat with the hood up. He thanked me profusely and held out his hand as if indicating he wanted to shake mine. I gave him my hand and he kissed it. Or, I thought he did, but more on that later. It felt really slobbery. He was foreign, so I thought maybe in his culture this is how he thanked people, so I just wiped my hand off on my jeans when he wasn't looking. He started asking me questions, ones that were pretty standard for some of the people I went on the bus with. He asked if I was a student, what I studied, and how my classes were going. He then asked if I rode the bus at this time every day. And that's when the red flags came. I gave him a vague answer saying that it depended, which was true enough because my English class wasn't every day. 2 days later I start making the same trip. He picks me up at the same spot. He acts all surprised when seeing me, but something told me he was looking for me. I was in the back, which was this large bench seat, and he comes and sits next to me. Without asking, he grabs my hand, and then I realized that he hadn't been kissing it as he rose it to his mouth. He had been licking it. I felt sick to my stomach and paralyzed with fear and disgust. He told me that Christmas was coming up and that he was a very lonely man, and asked if I would join him this Christmas. I made up something and told him that I was going to see family out of state for Christmas. He started asking me where I worked, and I told him that I worked at a department store, but not the name or the location. I texted my mom that I needed to be picked up from the bus stop. I started wearing hooded jackets so I could hide my face. He would come on the bus, look around, and if he didn't see me, he would get off. I had even heard him telling the driver that he was looking for me. If he did see me, he wouldn't try to talk to me now, but he would stand near me and give me a death stare. I would have gotten up to tell the bus driver, but if I made a move, he would step closer. I texted my mom to pick me up every night. She knew something was up, so I finally told her, sobbing like a baby. She told me I needed to take action, but I was too terrified. Finally, I knew it was the breaking point. After 2 months of fearing for my life, I asked my then BF and my friend who looked like a bear mated with a metal head, I'll call him Adam, to sit with me. They flanked me as I told the bus driver what was going on. The bus driver told me something that made my heart sink, that there wasn't much he could do. I hid my face as the creep came on the bus. He stared at me and started to come toward me. Adam gave him a death glare and I was surprised. The creep looked scared, but he still tried to grab my attention.
"Get away from her,"
the bus driver yelled. The creeper looked up, bewildered.
"Yeah, you. Get away from her,"
the bus driver yelled again.
"She's my friend,"
the creeper whined.
"She doesn't want to be your friend. Get away from her."
The creeper backed off. I sighed in relief. Adam told me later that he had asked his brother, I'll call him Dave, about this guy, and apparently the brother came across him before. Dave had been on another line when the creeper sat next to him. There were a couple of teen girls and the creeper leaned over and asked Dave how much he'd pay him if he ate those girls right in front of him. Dave said that if he ever saw him again, he would rip his throat out. He never saw the creeper on that line again. Unfortunately, this isn't the end of the story. A year later, Adam and my ex were taking me home when we looked up and there was the creeper. He came and sat by me and Adam gave him a death stare when he tried to get my attention. He then started a conversation with a man who was bragging about being a security guard at a local venue. The security guard was getting ready to do a Lady Gaga concert, and the creeper asked him if she would be in lingerie. The security guard looked weirded out and said something like, "Yeah, I guess." I never saw him again after that. I'm 27 now, turn 28 next month. This story takes place 10 years ago when I was a senior in high school. Keep in mind that this is a true experience I've gone through. This isn't a secondhand story. During summer break leading up to my senior year, my mom and I had to move. I'll save you the details, but we ended up on government housing. The rent was dirt cheap, but the downside was the neighborhood. I live in Oklahoma, by the way. Our first day in our new apartment, there was a meeting called because the police officer that patrols the complex was shot. That should give you an idea of how bad things were there. The complex did have a gate around it, even though it was never locked. If I go out the back door, I'd pass through the gate and into a 7-Eleven parking lot. Even the people who worked there were awful. Despite only having 4 pumps, the parking lot was big with a payphone on both sides. The phone on the west side of the building right next to the bus stop was broken, even though it looked normal. We will be coming back to that payphone. It was a Friday night and my brother had invited me over to stay the night. He lived in an awful neighborhood as well, about 5 to 10 miles away. We were both adjusting to living in bad neighborhoods. His was slightly better. His was more drug dealing while mine was more violence. Life was depressing as we didn't even have a house phone. All I had were my CDs and N64 and that was already pretty dated. I felt cut off from the world, but I was gonna go hang out with my brother, so I was excited. We had a car, but we were poor and I didn't have enough money for gas, so I hopped on the city bus. This is where it gets weird. I watched the bus from my back door because there's no way I was standing in front of that creepy payphone. I pay my fare and have a seat in the back. I came in through the door closest to the back of the bus, so I barely noticed there was another person sitting in the middle. He was an older white guy, really creepy looking. Had to be late 40s. My first thought was how grateful I was for being a male, because if I were a 16-year-old girl on that bus with this guy, she might not make it home. Now, I didn't actually think that he would go super creeper, but I was wrong. This was the last bus on this route for the night. My house was at the beginning and my brother's house was towards the end. Surely I thought that if I'm on the bus for 40 minutes out of the 50 minutes it takes for the bus to go one way, this guy would get off before me. But he stayed. And stayed. Then I started getting nervous. Where was this guy going? Surely he had a planned destination before I got on. My stop approached. The bus fare was 60 cents. I only had 90 cents after I paid the fare. I was going to stop and get a cheap canned soda, so I hit the button in front of the store. Now, the creepy guy who had been trying to pretend he wasn't looking back at me every few minutes hears the ding. He quickly pretends to hit the button as if it were his stop. I'm now officially scared. I skipped on the soda, which oddly enough probably saved my life. I didn't want to run because I felt that he would pick up on my fear and make a move, but I did walk pretty fast and was out of the bus before he had the chance to stand up. Once out of view, I bolted to my brother's apartment. The door's locked. He's not home. The sun is going down and I have nowhere to hide. He's always home on Friday. He's always home at this time. But I realized that the creepy guy was nowhere in sight and I calmed down. But I did know he was out there somewhere. The bus had 5 minutes before it hit the end of the line and turns around. 5 minutes from my brother's to the end and back only gave me 10 minutes to make a choice, and I already wasted 5 minutes. I decided to try to catch the bus home, seeing as how I still had 90 cents. I make it to the stop to see the bus coming back. If I had wasted a minute longer, I'd be stuck there. But from behind an apartment building, he emerged, looking at me until the bus door opened, and he got back on. I had 30 seconds to decide if I was going to be alone in this neighborhood after dark, stuck outside, or get on the bus he just got on. My logic was that at least if I got on the bus, there would be a driver with me, so I wouldn't be alone. I got on the bus. I decide to sit right next to the driver. I look back and he's sitting in the spot I was during the first ride. He knew I was onto him, but he wasn't going to give up. After the quietest 40-minute bus ride, I hit the button in front of the 7-Eleven because I figured people would see if this guy tried anything. Once again, he pretended like it was his stop, hearing the ding, looking at me, and pressing the button. I was by the door. This time I ran. Seeing a 16-year-old running for his life out of a bus got some looks. Then people looked back at the bus. I got to the gate, and when I turned around to see where he was, we locked eyes. He got nervous now that people were looking at him, so he grabbed the payphone, pushed a few buttons, and started talking. He was pretending to have a conversation on the broken payphone. That's when I knew this guy had bad intentions, that I wasn't just paranoid. I didn't realize how lucky I was until I walked into the apartment. There was my mom and my brother. My brother forgot I was coming over and had just arrived moments before I did. He had his backpack and clothes and said that he had come over to stay the night. In other words, if I didn't get back on that bus, I would have been sitting on the porch of my brother's apartment for God knows how long, until someone went looking for me, which they did not have the gas to do.